Mr. Yoder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to ask Yoder number 1.
Clerk will read.
Amendment offered by Mr. Yoder at the end of the bill.
The reading is dispensed with. Gentlemen is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you're one of the millions of Americans around the world that have, around the country that have been concerned about the IRS getting involved in politics and targeting specific groups and engaging in a way that is inconsistent with their overall arching premise as an entity, I'd ask you to join me in supporting legislation that would stop the SEC from also being drawn into a political debate as well. This amendment would prevent the SEC, a market regulator, from writing new rules that would target public companies for new political disclosure requirements that are not applicable to other entities, labor unions, pension funds, and the like. The recent experience at the IRS has demonstrated what can occur when an executive branch agency allows campaign finance in partisan politics to interfere with its core mission. What's more, the SEC is already missing key deadlines for Dodd-Frank and the Jobs Act, and as the ranking member stated, not enough funds for the SEC to do the mission that already exists. We already have an agency that regulates campaign finance and political disclosure. It's called the Federal Election Commission. The SEC is the cop on the beat of Wall Street, and it should not divert taxpayer dollars from its important mission to jump into the partisan wrangling of D.C. politics, a directive that Congress has not given them. In addition, shareholders who want public corporations to disclose political spending on their SEC filings or annual report to shareholders can already petition to have the issue included on the ballot and voted on in the annual shareholder meeting. In fact, many shareholders have successfully put this issue on the ballot and voted on it, showing that the current process works. Unfortunately, for proponents of having the SEC get involved, shareholders have overwhelmingly opposed these proposals. In fact, 80% of shareholders do not vote in support of such requirements. Thus, an SEC rule requiring these disclosures would actually go against shareholder will and democratic process. Unhappy with their failure to reach the goal through legislation or shareholder votes, proponents are now trying to make the SEC force shareholders against their will. Politics does not belong at the SEC, just as it did not belong at the IRS. Much like the IRS, the SEC is not a political regulator and does not have partisan safeguards in place. It does not have a bipartisan commission like the FEC, and no doubt every ruling the SEC would make on political disclosure cases would be called unfairly partisan and be bitterly contested and consume SEC resources to defend. Moreover, any SEC rule on political disclosure would violate the First Amendment by design because it would unconstitutionally target public companies for new public regulations that are not applicable to other entities like unions or pension funds. Targeting certain groups or organizations for additional regulation is unfair and unconstitutional. The IRS taught us that we need to lead the SEC out of partisan politics, let them focus on protecting Americans' retirements and keeping our markets safe.
Chairman Crenshaw.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of this amendment. I think Mr. Yoder's laid out some very good arguments in favor of this, and I think I would tell you that when the new commissioner of the SEC came before our subcommittee, she indicated she had a lot on her plate. She has a lot of statutory requirements that she's going to have to comply with, and I don't know whether she's thinking about doing this or not, but it certainly would get in the way of doing the things that she's actually supposed to be doing. The SEC is not an expert in campaign finance. It wasn't set up to be that. We already have one of those. It's called the FEC. So I think we ought to pass this amendment just to be sure that the SEC focuses on the work that they've been given to meet those statutory requirements, write the rules that really impact the areas and not get into some other areas. So I urge a yes vote.
Mr. Serrano.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to oppose the gentleman's amendment. The SEC is currently considering issuing a rule to require publicly traded companies to disclose their political expenditures to their shareholders. It is important for shareholders to have a better understanding of what exactly their investments are doing with their time and money. Some corporations have already decided to voluntarily disclose their political spending. This sort of openness and transparency should be extended to all publicly traded corporations. In my view, shareholders deserve to know what is done with the money they invest in a corporation, and that includes political spending. We should allow the SEC to decide what it is in the best interest of our nation's investors. And I know that the gentleman's attempt is to say that Congress should not be telling them what to do, but the fact of life is that this is an issue that's been very controversial for a while, and this is not the time to do this. So I would hope that we would defeat this amendment.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Yoder is recognized to finish. 1 minute.
Let me say just briefly, let's keep the SEC out of partisan politics. We know how difficult it is when partisanship gets involved in D.C. in any entity. It happened at the IRS, happens in Congress. The SEC is the top cop on Wall Street. It's an opportunity for mischief, and it's not fair. It's not being applied to labor unions and other entities. So it's really just an opportunity to target one political group. It's the same thing the IRS was doing, and we don't want to go down this road. We've already heard about how the SEC has limited funds. They're not getting things done on time as it is. Why would they go forward with this? Congress hasn't told them to do it. It's not been directed by us for them to do it. They're going to potentially take it on their own. We ought to do the nonpartisan thing today and ask the SEC to stay out of partisan politics and to pass this amendment. I yield back.
Question is on the Yoder amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
No.
The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a vote on that, please.